Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Lisa Mateo. Here are the top stories we're following today.
A developing story in India. An Air India plane reportedly headed for London's Gatwick Airport. That has now been confirmed, in fact, has crashed shortly after takeoff. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us with the very latest. John.
All right, this is an Air India Boeing 787, Nathan, traveling from Ahmedabad Airport to London's Gatwick Airport. This is Flight 171. It crashed shortly after takeoff. The flight was carrying 242 passengers and crew. The airliner had reached an altitude of 625 feet. This according to data from Flight Radar 24. Now, social media videos also show black smoke billowing from the scene. Faz Ahmad Kidwawi, the Director General of the Directorate of Civil Aviation in India, is telling the Associated Press that Flight 171 crashed into a residential area called Meghani 5 minutes after taking off at 1:38 p.m. local time. This is a 787 Dreamliner. It's a wide-body, twin-engine plane, and supposedly the first crash ever of a Boeing 787 aircraft. This, at least according to Aviation Safety Network database. Way too early, Nathan, even to speculate about a cause. No indication of any foul play, but it is worth noting, we do have to note this. This comes at a time of intensified tension between India and neighboring Pakistan. And, of course, all morning long, stay with us right here on Bloomberg Radio. We'll bring you any update as soon as it becomes available.
We continue to monitor the latest as well on the immigration protests in Los Angeles that have spread nationwide now. The downtown area of L.A. has been under curfew for a second night as local leaders try to stop vandalism and looting. L.A. County Sheriff Robert Luna is urging demonstrators to remain peaceful.
There's a big distinction between individuals that protest and demonstrate to violent, destructive, basically anarchist. I mean, just creating that chaos.
And as police try to keep the peace, the federal government is expanding its show of force. The National Guard is assisting U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement with immigration arrests. And Attorney General Pam Bondi says the administration is invoking the Hobbs Act to let federal prosecutors take over local criminal cases.
We're going to do everything within our legal authority to protect our law enforcement officers and all the people in California right now.
Meanwhile, the Justice Department is asking a federal judge not to interfere with the deployment of Marines and National Guard in L.A. A hearing is set for this afternoon. All this as protests spread to other cities, including New York, Chicago, and Milwaukee. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has promised to send the National Guard to respond to protests planned in his state this week. And a curfew was declared last night in Spokane, Washington, as well, in response to protests there.
Well, we now turn to the latest on the trade front, Nathan. President Trump says he's planning to send letters to trading partners within the next 2 weeks to set unilateral tariff rates. That move comes ahead of a July 9th deadline to reimpose higher duties on dozens of economies once the current 90-day pause expires. President Trump spoke to reporters yesterday.
We're rocking in terms of deals. Now, at a certain point, we're just going to send letters out. And I think you understand that, saying this is the deal. You can take it or you can leave it. You don't have to use it. You don't have to shop in the United States, as I say.
So far, the White House has only reached a yet-to-be-implemented trade framework with the UK and a tariff truce with China.
And Lisa, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says the European Union is likely to be among the last deals the U.S. completes. He tells CNBC that he expects to see deals with other countries to start coming next week and the week after, in his words.
Japan's prime minister still sees a large gap between the U.S. and Japanese stances on trade talks. Now, Shigeru Ishiba is expected to meet President Trump on the sidelines of the group of 7 leaders gathering in Canada starting Sunday. Ishiba says he doesn't have a particular timeline in mind for reaching an agreement.
In Washington, debate continues over President Trump's big tax and spending cut bill. A top Republican negotiator says senators are considering a $30,000 cap on the state and local tax deduction. That would be down from the $40,000 in the House-passed bill. Republican Congresswoman Lisa McClain of Michigan says she hopes the Senate doesn't change SALT too much.
The SALT caucus, which we have here in the House and they don't have in the Senate for obvious reasons, they've been pretty dug in, and I'm not here to say they're right, I'm not here to say they're wrong, but they've been pretty dug in, and that was one of our biggest issues in the House. That just can't be touched.
Michigan Republican Lisa McClain spoke on Bloomberg Television. Senate Republicans also plan to scale back some cuts to federal food aid in the House bill. The Senate's version would sell millions of acres of federal land to help pay for the measure. That move is expected to raise up to $10 billion over 10 years.
Well, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has named 8 new vaccine policy advisors to replace the panel that he abruptly dismissed earlier this week. They include several vocal vaccine critics and one who identifies as a, quote, anti-vaxxer. Now, the move comes as Kennedy makes major changes to how immunizations are studied and administered in the U.S. and paves the way for a more skeptical approach to the use of shots that prevent deadly infections.
Lisa, oil is retreating this morning following yesterday's nearly 5% gain. That came after the U.S. government ordered a partial evacuation of its embassy in Iraq amid rising security risks. We get more from Bloomberg News energy reporter Anthony DePaula.
If we look at that picture, it's really that risk of something happening in terms of the Middle East and in terms of an outbreak of potential violence in the Middle East between the U.S. and Iran, between Israel and Iran. That's really the risk that is pushing prices higher.
But Bloomberg energy reporter Anthony DePaula, and this morning the State Department is limiting travel for U.S. Embassy staff in Israel, citing regional tensions. The Middle East produces about a third of the world's oil.
Well, turning to the economy now, Nathan, a day after underlying inflation rose by less than forecast for the 4th month in a row, we get another key reading this morning. At 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time, we get the May reading for producer prices. Bloomberg's Michael McKee has a preview.
Economists fooled by the benign rise in consumer prices will again look for tariff-induced inflation in today's data on what companies are charging for goods and services. Once again, the expectation is for a rise in prices in both the headline and core PPI, easier to do in this report because both declined in April. While price increases haven't flowed into retail price tags, many companies have reported passing some or all of the tariffs onto their customers, particularly manufacturers. While another downside surprise would cheer markets, the real impact will come when economists break down changes in individual categories to forecast the Fed's primary inflation indicator, the PCE index, out at the end of the month. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
On the equity front, shares of Oracle up more than 7% in early trading. After the bell, the company said its cloud infrastructure sales will grow more than 70% this fiscal year. Brent Thill is an equity research analyst at Jefferies.
Oracle's got their mojo back. We've said this, this company was trying to find their way. They were late to cloud. They were late to cloud applications. They're a little bit late to AI, but I think they're back in the race.
Now, Jefferies analyst Brent Thill speaking to us after the earnings report. CEO Safra Catz says that Oracle is on its way to becoming, quote, one of the world's largest cloud infrastructure companies.
And repeating the breaking news this morning, Lisa, Air India says a Boeing 787 aircraft traveling from Ahmedabad to London's Gatwick Airport has crashed. Local media say the Flight 171 was carrying 242 passengers and crew. Boeing shares are extending their declines in the pre-market, now down more than 5%.
Now time for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Lisa. Protests are growing across the country over the Trump administration's immigration raids and the federal troop response to protests in Los Angeles. The NYPD arrested several people last night in Lower Manhattan. These 2 protesters were in New York's Foley Square.
I think success is stopping as many people from being unlawfully taken from their families. Success is seeing people treated like human beings.
Putting due process back in place, right?
Yeah.
And actually respecting our Constitution.
However, Wednesday was much calmer than Tuesday night when dozens were arrested. A New Jersey federal judge ruled the Trump administration cannot detain or deport Mahmoud Khalil for the reasons it cited. The judge granted a preliminary injunction concluding the Columbia University graduate student would continue to suffer irreparable harm if he remains detained. Last week, the court held that Khalil, who'd been involved with student protests in support of the people of Gaza, would likely succeed in his challenge to the administration's attempts to deport him on foreign policy grounds. Former movie mogul Harvey Weinstein has been convicted of one of the top charges in his sex crimes retrial. A jury found Weinstein guilty of engaging in a criminal sex act on Minnie Haley, but he has been acquitted of engaging in a criminal sex act on Kaya Sokola, the more recent accuser who had come forward. Jurors were as yet unable to reach a verdict on a third charge involving Jessica Mann and will resume deliberations today. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Lisa.
Thank you, Michael. Time now for our Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. For that, we bring in John Stashower. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Lisa. The Indiana Pacers yet to lose 2 playoff games in a row, yet to trail in a series off the Game 2 loss at Oklahoma City. The Pacers came home, got their first Game 3 win of the postseason. They beat the Thunder 116-107. They lead the NBA Finals 2-1. Benedict Mathurin off the bench to lead Indiana with 27 points. OKC had 17 turnovers. Game 4 is tomorrow. The Dallas Mavericks are the third team to tell the Knicks, we are not letting you interview our coach to be your coach. The day after Houston and Minnesota did it, the Mavs denied permission for the Knicks to speak with Jason Kidd. Another Mets win at Citi Field, where they are now 26-7, a 5-0 shutout of Washington, a rare complete game. It came from David Peterson. He allowed only 6 hits, did not walk a batter. Brandon Nimmo homered twice. Another Yankee win over Kansas City. They are 5-0 against the Royals and 12-3 over the last 2 seasons, including that playoff victory. The Yanks beat KC 6-3, 6 scoreless innings by Clark Schmidt, and yet another home run by Aaron Judge. Red Sox topped the Rays 4-3. Early tee times this morning to begin the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Defending champion Bryson DeChambeau starts his round at 7:30. Here's DeChambeau's thoughts on the Oakmont course.
You can't just bomb it on every single hole and blast over bunkers and have a wedge run up to the front of the green. You can on a lot of the holes, but not on every one of them. So I think this golf course, you have to be just a fraction more strategic, especially the rough is so long.
Rory McIlroy tees off at 7:40 this morning. Scotty Scheffler's the big favorite. He will play this afternoon. They'll play Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final tonight. Florida hosting Edmonton and leading the series 2-1. The Rangers are said to be close to a deal to trade Chris Kreider to Anaheim. A Ranger for 13 years, the third leading goal scorer in Ranger history. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Lisa, Nathan.
All right. Thank you, John. Taking a look at the markets right now, we have S&P futures. They're down about 0.3%. Dow futures falling 0.5%, 224 points. NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, or 75 points. Going to the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, it's down 0.4%. Over to the yield space, we have the 2-year yield 3.93%. That's down 2 basis points. And the yield on the 10-year 4.40%. And that's down 1 basis point.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Following developing news out of Western India, where an Air India flight carrying 242 passengers and crew has crashed near Ahmedabad in the western state of Gujarat. Joining us now for the very latest is Bloomberg News aviation reporter Danny Lee. And Danny, obviously, this is a fast developing story. What is the latest that we know so far? Good morning.
Yeah, Nathan, good morning. So this is a breaking news development. So it's an Air India Boeing Co. 787 Dreamliner, which crashed shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad, and it was heading to London's Gatwick Airport. So it was taking off around roughly 1:30 local time in the afternoon. And there's been various videos circulated on social media, including one of the plane flying at low altitude and heading into the ground, and then smoke and fire billowing from that. So we have seen, though, the markets react quite swiftly, and the shares, pre-market shares in Boeing down 5.5%. on this news. For investors, when you look at Boeing, it's clearly too early to tell what has happened, what would be the cause of this crash. But at least for the moment, there will be a lot of reaction, and we have some reaction from Indian officials commenting on the crash, saying they are shocked and devastated about the accident. We have Air India confirming that there was an accident that had taken place today, but they don't have any further details at the moment. But of course, for the flight involved, it was carrying 242 passengers and crew, according to some local media reports.
Yeah, certainly we could go into the struggles that Boeing has been trying to get out from under ever since the door plug blowout situation more than a year ago, and the change under new CEO Kelly Ortberg. But before we get to all that, Danny, do we know anything in terms of the conditions on the ground, anything that could tell us what might have caused this crash?
It's very hard to tell what could be the kind of contributing factors. I mean, whether it be weather, whether it be any mechanical issues with the plane. What we can say is this plane was around 11 years old, so it's not too new, not too old. It's somewhere in the middle, basically. But it's for the Boeing 787 aircraft, it would mark the first whole loss in the entire time it has entered service, which is now many, many years.
What do we know about the condition of the fleet of Air India's Boeing lineup? Is it an aging fleet? Is it relatively new?
Well, for Air India, it has been going through an extensive overhaul of its fleet. Its existing fleet right now is aging. It's not to say that they don't keep their planes in good condition already, but they are investing a lot of money buying a lot of new Boeing and Airbus aircraft in order to overhaul its fleet and also to expand. So under new ownership, being privatized coming from state ownership under the Tata Group, it has undergone a huge amount of investment, and it's just time it takes to get those new planes in particular, delivered. But it has been working through that process, and a multi-year process at that.
And as we continue to monitor the situation, we're getting further confirmations from more sources about the fact that this has happened. We just saw a post on X from London's Gatwick Airport, which is the destination of Air India Flight 171, confirming on its end that that plane was due to land at London Gatwick later on this evening, local time. So further confirmation that at least that flight was at the center of this. Danny, of course, I know your background is in aviation, but it can't be ignored that this is coming just a couple of weeks after pretty heightened tensions between India and Pakistan as well. Obviously, we're really at a very early stage in terms of trying to figure out the cause of this, whether it was something mechanical or something more nefarious. But that could enter into the conversation as well as we start to gather more details and facts on the ground.
Yeah, I think the authorities will be looking at a whole wide range of information at this stage. No one would be in a position to rule out anything until particularly they start to locate and recover the so-called black boxes. These are the information, the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, that would give all the necessary clues to understand what happened to this aircraft. But yes, as you alluded to, there has been heightened state of tensions in recent weeks between India and Pakistan, although of late tensions have calmed down, particularly as US President Donald Trump has intervened and there has been a cessation of hostilities in particular.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Lisa Mateo. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.